Good morning to everybody in Death Valley that is still enjoying what happened last night. LSU gets an overtime thrilling win, instant classic kind of stuff, 32-31 over Alabama. Gosh, there's so much to unpack here. Brian Kelly going for two. We're going to get to that in a minute. But we talked a little bit about what we thought LSU had to do to pull off this upset. Now, make no mistake, we thought LSU would play them tough. We knew there was a couple things that had to go their way for them to eventually pull off this win. But the first thing that we thought would have to happen, and they did to perfection, was swing first on the bully. Because there's so many teams that Alabama comes to town, or you go to Alabama, whatever it is, and you start to play the Alabama jersey. You see Nick Saban on the other sideline. You see Bryce Young, who's got a Heisman Trophy at his crib, and you're like, oh boy. You sort of hesitate, sort of tippy-toe into the lion's den. That wasn't what happened yesterday. LSU took their best shot and connected emphatically. Went up 7-0, I believe. Got the interception in the red zone. They got after it from the jump. And they very quickly were able to see, hey, we can play with these guys. Yes, it's Alabama. Yes, they got the goat on the sideline. But we can play with these guys. And you saw that formulate throughout the rest of the game. There was no stop the bleeding moment on defense. Another thing that we talked about for LSU, so often we wondered, what happens if they do start slow, like we've seen them do at times? They got down 17-3 against Ole Miss. What happens if that happens? Do we see some sort of, Alabama pulling away? Because Alabama's not Ole Miss. They got a little bit more flexibility on offense. What happens if they're not able to keep pace, more or less? Something we were watching. And credit to Matt House and this defense. Same thing that we talked about. They took their best shot, and there was no having to adjust at halftime and saying, okay, we're down 10-0, now what? I mean, they came in with a plan, and they executed it in a violent fashion. Harold Perkins, y'all, I don't have the adjectives to adequately describe what he did last night. Dude's only a freshman, was at prom a few months ago. He was a dog. He got the responsibility to spy Bryce Young, just the Heisman Trophy winner from last year, and he was up to the task and then some. Harold Perkins, his blend of speed and power, he's able to get off blocks and play the run, but also he's able to chase down your back and able to chase down Bryce Young. Like the flexibility that he adds to this LSU defense, I don't know if they win that game without the performance from number 40 last night. I would also say this. I don't know if he's going to wear 40 his whole career. There's another number that rhymes with Kevin. Some people think it's lucky. Other greats have worn it at LSU previously. I'll leave it at that, but he's a dog, and I think he's just getting started. So really excited for Harold Perkins and what he's going to do the rest of the way. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, thank you to all the LSU faithful that already have subscribed. We love you. If you haven't yet, come join the party. We have a good time. I'll leave it at that. Here's the secret ingredient for me when watching LSU. When the ground game is working for them consistently, no matter what it looks like, they are one of the most dangerous programs in the country. I don't care that it's Brian Kelly's first year. I don't care they got a transfer quarterback. I don't care who they're playing against. When they can run the football effectively, we have seen on multiple occasions, they have so much around that ground game that they're just, you run out of answers, quite frankly. The defense is so good. You have so many playmakers. And Josh Williams, how about Josh Williams last night? Didn't get a ton of carries, but when he did, it was timely. That timely touchdown. He averaged 7.7 yards a carry. Jayden Daniels off the read option game had 95 yards, and that what proved to be ultimately the game-winning touchdown, I suppose, in overtime. Like, when they can dictate their tempo to you, all bets are off. And credit Brian Kelly for scheming up Jayden Daniels and playing to his strengths and understanding, hey, this dude is special on the perimeter. Let him cook. Let him eat. Don't try and saddle a wild horse. And credit Jayden Daniels for taking that, doing well, and then being able to throw off of it and being efficient and also being assertive downfield. We said that would be a thing too. You got to try and challenge the secondary. Was the stat sheet lit up? Not really. But they tested that defensive secondary for Alabama. And honestly, if they didn't get a big play a lot of the time, what do we say? They were drawing a pass interference call. A lot of people want to go to the box score and say, well, they didn't necessarily, they look at the previous box scores and say, well, this, and this, they didn't have a, enormous day from this receiver. Yeah, well, what's not in that box score, or rather a few rows down? Penalties. LSU did a great job forcing a lot of those and, like I said, taking their swing at the big dog in the SEC. Now, How about the courage from Brian Kelly to go for 2? I mean, I cannot say enough good things about that decision because that takes some guts. I mean, if they didn't get that 2-point conversion at the end of the game, or in overtime rather, what are we saying today? Brian Kelly, you had Bama on the ropes, man. You just got to keep playing with them, make them make the mistake. And Brian Kelly said, I'm tired of playing for overtimes. We're going for the kill. We're going for the kill now. That was so impressive to me because, like we said, so often teams play Alabama and they get into sort of that crunch time scenario and they hope to win. Brian Kelly going for 2 last night, he wasn't hoping for anything. He wasn't hoping for a win. He wasn't hoping for any kind of outcome. He said, we got him on the ropes. We're taking our knockout punch right now. We're swinging. I'm betting on my guys. Let's go. Get 5 on the edge. Let him create. Let him get in space. Do what he does. And Mason Taylor, a freshman, getting in the paint to end the game. You cannot say enough about LSU and the grit and the fight that they showed last night. And it was phenomenal seeing Brian Kelly get emotional in his post-game interview on the field. And Brian Kelly, if you know Brian Kelly, you know he doesn't really show emotion like that. He doesn't really do the waterworks. And we saw him get emotional last night because he understands where this team has come from. He understands there was a lot of guys last year waving the white flag under the previous regime. Not in this program. He understands where they were in game 1, where they lost a heartbreaker to Florida State. How far they've come since those days to celebrating last night in Death Valley. That's why Brian Kelly showed that emotion. And that's why he's proud of this program going forward. Now, speaking of going forward, they got a lot in front of them. SEC title, very much possible. Now the college football playoff, it feels a lot more attainable. Now, 2 loss teams never made it, but LSU, if they were to win out the rest of the way, they'd be an SEC champ. They'd have a win over Alabama, obviously, from last night, and a win over likely the number 1 team in the country in the Georgia Bulldogs, if that ends up playing the way that we perceive it to. So for LSU, there's a lot in front of them. But this is only year 1 of Brian Kelly's regime. To have this conversation about them beating Nick Saban and doing what they did last night in Death Valley in year 1 under Brian Kelly. You can't say enough good things about what he's done with this program and the buy-in that this program has exhibited into Brian Kelly's way of doing things. Regardless of what happens the rest of the way in 2022, there's some exciting times on the horizon in Baton Rouge. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm J.D. Piquel. This has been The Hard Count. Nick Brake does a real heavy lifting, but you can help drive this whole operation by subscribing to the channel. Also follow me on the socials, Twitter and Instagram. Do a lot of stuff there that we incorporate here. Also just a fun way for us to interact. All right? So we're going to keep the party rolling, and we will see y'all next time. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.